J.D. Vance has taken there to the floor to introduce a bill to ban federal mask mandates in this country. Let's step in here and listen.
Mask mandates and regulate social gatherings. I've heard some of my friends on the opposite side of the aisle say that no one is trying to do this, but let's just recapture and summarize the last couple of weeks. In August, Lionsgate Studio asked its employees to wear masks at their filming facility. Last week, Kaiser Permanente reimposed the requirement for staff and visitors to wear masks at its Santa Rosa, California facility. Schools such as Morris Brown College in Atlanta and even local public schools here in the D.C. area have reimposed mask mandates. Now, it's not just that masks, according to randomized controlled studies, do no good. It's that they can actively cause harm. We know that a generation of school children have suffered significant speech and developmental disabilities because this country panicked instead of using its brain and forced toddlers and small children to wear masks. We cannot return to the failed policies of the COVID pandemic. I'm not mad that we screwed up. I made mistakes. Many people in this body made mistakes. What I do think that we should avoid is repeating the mistakes in 2023. Let's learn from the mistakes that we made instead of just doubling down on them. This policy does not set anything for an unlimited period of time. It says that for the next 15 months, the government can't force you to wear a mask on planes, on public transit, or in public schools. Taxpayer dollars cannot be used to force and enforce a mandate against our people. It's not setting a policy that we cannot deal with pandemics in the future. If something else comes, God forbid, then let this body deal with it at this time. But now let's learn the message. Let's heed the message from the American people, and let's learn the lessons of the past couple of years. Mandatory masking was a failure. It had costs for very little benefits, and we shouldn't repeat it. Mr. President, as of in legislative session, I ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of S-2738, the Freedom to Breathe Act, which is at desk. Further, that the bill be considered read a third time and passed, and the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate.
Is there objection?
Reserving the right to object.
Senator from Massachusetts.
This bill would undermine the ability of states, of cities, and towns across this country to make decisions about what's best for their communities. It would silence and hamstring public health experts who have guided our nation out of the darkest days of a pandemic that has killed 1,139,000 people in our country in 3 years. Let me repeat that. This disease has killed 1,139,000 people already. And doctors, experts are saying that COVID is coming back. It's on the rise once again. This provision would violate a long-held belief in the Republican Party that states and localities should not be told what to do by a federal government removed from the realities that they're seeing on the ground in their neighborhoods. This bill is little more than an attempt by Republicans to dismantle a public health infrastructure that had to be built in order to deal with this greatest of pandemics since 1918. What public health experts and the medical professionals are talking about is an upcoming COVID and flu and RSV season and preparing for it. These healthcare heroes are the same ones who risk their lives to save lives. And we should continue to protect that right to make decisions on the health of their patients, of their communities. And that's what locally focused healthcare is all about. Here's what we do know. Last year, the combined forces of this triple-demic of flu, RSV, and COVID strained healthcare centers to a breaking point. Healthcare providers tried to keep up as emergency departments overflowed with sick children, adults, and seniors. And people are still getting sick. This year, healthcare providers, health centers, public health departments, transportation workers, and school districts are once again preparing to protect students and seniors and disabled and immunocompromised people all across our country. Millions of Americans will be doing what we can to protect ourselves and our loved ones. And our communities must be able to take steps to save lives and keep people from getting sick or getting sicker, including the tools of vaccines and masks. But the only thing that the Republicans seem willing to mask is their antipathy for making health care affordable and acceptable for millions of Americans. Republicans already fought this year to throw people off of Medicaid and their health coverage. Not a single Republican voted to make insulin and other medications more affordable for seniors. Republicans have blocked legislation to protect the right of individuals to make health care decisions with their doctors. It makes no sense to put limits on how communities and individuals can protect themselves. This bill is a red herring. It is a false debate. We should have an aquarium down in the well of the Senate to capture all of the red herrings that are being introduced into this public health debate. It's a distraction, it's misleading, and it is meant to deflect from what the GOP really stands for right now: gimmicks over people. Republicans have to understand that we have to provide the options for our healthcare heroes to save lives. They will make us less safe because they will be tying the hands of healthcare professionals in order to implement policies that protect against an addition to 1.139 million people who have already died. You argue that this bill is about freedom, but it's not. Freedom is parents and students knowing their school can take every step possible to keep them from getting sick or taking home an illness that could hurt their siblings, their parents, or their grandparents. Freedom is workers who know their workplace on a plane, train, or even in a classroom is safe. Freedom is knowing that when people travel either on their way to work, by way of public transportation, or across the country to visit family for the holidays, they'll know that every safety measure is available to keep them and their families safe. We must protect the freedom for communities to have every public health tool available if it's needed in the opinion of the public health officials in that community, in that state. They should be the ones making the decision at the local level, looking at the dangers to their...
All right, so that is Ed Markey, the Democrat. He's speaking after J.D. Vance introduced this bill to ban mask mandates. He's looking to block the Biden administration specifically from potentially implementing a plan through the end of 2024. This is a unanimous consent that he's looking for on the Senate floor. That would obviously require the approval of 100 senators. That's likely not going to happen.
Probably not.
But it's sparking the debate and the discussion. Yeah. As J.D. Vance pointed out at the beginning there are some universities who are now signing on to this, to implementing masks being worn again. J.D. Vance is back up, and he's speaking again on the Senate floor. Let's listen.
Business. Number one, Senator Markey mentioned the tragic number of Americans, over 1 million, who lost their lives due to COVID, and I agree that it's a tragedy, and I wish that we hadn't lost them. But we lost them in spite of some of the most aggressive masking policies in the world. If mandatory masking were going to save our citizens, it would have already done so. That's the first point. The second point is that this legislation doesn't prevent any of our citizens from wearing masks. If you would like to wear a mask, of course, you have the right to do so. But the senator talked about freedom. What I would like is for the freedom of a school child to not be thrown out of classroom because he doesn't want to wear a mask. I would like the freedom of airline passengers to be able to go and visit their families and not be thrown off an airplane because they refuse to wear a mask. Freedom is fundamentally about respecting that you might have a different view than I do. Respecting that, accepting it, and not using government mandates to force our fellow citizens to do exactly what we want them to do, but to let us all figure this out together. The final point that I'll make here is I heard some pretty alarming rhetoric from my friend on the other side of the aisle. We are about to have some serious respiratory problems. We always do in the fall, and maybe it will be worse this fall and this winter than before. But I think that what our children most of all need, and I'm the father of 3 kids under the age of 7, they need us to not be Chicken Little about every single respiratory pandemic and problem that confronts this country. We are going to have people who get sick from viruses. It has always been thus, and the way to respond to it is with calmness, resolve, and strategic thinking, not by pretending the world is ending, because what has always happened is going to happen once again. We cannot repeat the anxiety, the stress, and the non-stop panic of the last couple of years. That's what this legislation is about. End the mandates, end the panic, and let's get back to some common sense. Mr. President, I yield.